Prehistory today. So if you have looked at your, so ladies and gentlemen, when I'm talking, you're not, please.
Can we just put the space bar for now?
Actually, the easiest one is the picking. Okay. Sorry, online. Usually the beginning of the videos are kind of fluffy because I can't turn this on, and then I have to go ahead and turn on the slideshow. So just so we're clear, you can take notes today if you want. You do not have to take notes, but keep in mind that anything I have on here is free game for the quiz on Monday. So I'm trying to get you guys in the habit of just always taking notes, okay? If you want to copy somebody else's notes, hopefully they are a very brilliant scholar, and so that they are going to cover everything so that when you copy their notes, they're going to be good. My suggestion is you copy your own notes. Yes, you have a question? The slideshow will be on Classroom. The video that we're recording right now also gets posted on Classroom because we've got the online students. So we kind of touched on some of these areas yesterday, but I want us to just go over them again. Please note that you've been assigned for tomorrow to go ahead and go on Khan Academy and look up the Apollo 11 stones, the Camelid Sacrum, and Stonehenge. We'll probably cover Stonehenge in the class. We've got a little bit on Stonehenge, and we may cover it a little bit more possibly tomorrow because I think it's a very significant piece of prehistorical art. But we're going to go ahead and look at this slide presentation, and then we're going to look at another one where you guys, it'll be a little more interactive. And you'll be asked to decide if something is art or not. So let's go ahead to the first slide. Thank you, Peyton. All right, so global prehistory. Just so we're clear here, artistic expression predates any written records. So man's desire to draw and his ability to draw, you can check on that later. I'll just let you know. Okay, to draw predates any kind of written language, and there are examples all over where people, ancient cultures have invested a lot into art, and we still don't know exactly why they did it. So just for your own information, prehistory is often divided into geological eras such as Paleolithic or Old Stone Age, and Neolithic, which is the New Stone Age. So there you've got a little bit of, Latin in there that helps us, dissect those words. All right, next slide. Okay, there's a common thread in prehistorical art worldwide that is connected, and we're actually going to be studying Oceania, Pacific Oceania, Indigenous Americas, and Africa next, because I feel like it's a better flow going from prehistory into those, because a lot of those cultures did not have a written language. They didn't write down their language, and so they were very much depicting things in a similar fashion to what the historical man. And that is a conjecture on my part, but I think it's probably a pretty good one. Their early art shows the connection of the natural world and prehistorical human beings in it. Human behavior and artistic expression was influenced by changing environments brought on by climate change. So those of you who thought, oh, climate change just started like what, in the 60s? No, it didn't. You had the European Ice Age. You have something called the Mini Ice Age, which was in the 1800s. The Saharan grasslands, so a lot of Africa and even the Saudi Peninsula was considered to be savanna or grasslands. And then as the things changed, the desert and the tectonic land shifts changed, the climate, and so early man had to adapt to or die. Okay, next one. Okay, so let's kind of look at this. So you guys, how many of you have taken world studies or even just basic history? Most of you should know what a hunter-gatherer is. Does anybody not know that? So just to reiterate, a hunter-gatherer, these were nomadic groups of people who their sole way of keeping themselves alive was to live a, not bohemian, like Bedouins are considered nomads. So they would wander around trying to find the best game at any given time. So, when the savannas were largely grassland, they could just follow these herds of, ibex or various other, four-footed beasts and, hunt them. And then that would be part of their food. But they also would look for berries, grains, and other things like that. So they lived, based in nature. So this is a great question for you guys to spend a couple minutes turning to a partner, or the three of you, in the case it can be. What are some of the variables that might affect a hunter-gatherer's survival? So spend a couple of minutes discussing that with yourselves. What do you think? What would those variables be? I'm going to discuss with Peyton, since she's over here, but you guys can still hear me, internet, sorry. I will show you viewing them discussing. Okay, so what do you think? So variables.
How much goes out to how much you have to go out to find food, have less downtime versus more, so more or less time to create or like to use it. It's pretty much like having survival, this is expression.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Okay, let's see if I've got this back to where it needs to be. I should put little tape marks on here. We don't want to Connor to be in the picture. Okay, so we're back. So you two ladies, what are some of the variables that you guys?
The weather would affect maybe the plants that grow.
Okay, so weather, excellent. All right, you guys here, somewhere in here. Hannah, you're two people. What did you guys come up with?
We also said weather, but kind of more like the fire sense.
The what?
Fire sense, so if they were in the grasslands,
Mhm.
fire.
There could be things besides weather, catastrophic events. Don't ask me to spell catastrophic this early in the morning. So we're just going to put cat events, which probably brings your own thing in those various savannas. There may be big cats hunting you. All right, so gentlemen here.
The animals.
Animals. So we're looking at their prey. So what about the animals?
They kill it.
Food source if they leave.
Okay, so if the food source, walks away?
Migrates. Yeah.
Migrates,
Yeah.
okay. Excellent. So, Maya and Tia, can you embellish, add on any of these?
We also thought that how many people that are advanced.
How many people are what?
How many people they have to do.
Okay, so, the number. So, and that's an excellent thought, because if you get too big of a group, it may need to split off. All right, you guys back there.
The following animals, it's not to follow a water source.
Excellent. I was waiting for somebody to say that. Water.
Water.
All right, some really good answers. So obviously the weather very much affects the hunter-gatherer. Catastrophic events, torrential rain, although I would say torrential rain probably wasn't as likely there as other places. Your prey, not only do you have to think about whether they migrate, and that's one of the reasons why these people were nomadic, is they were following these animals to different grazing grounds, but depending on the weather, how much rain fell, will, if you overhunt an area, all of a sudden you don't have any more animals, because you need to have a certain core part that will reproduce and produce more animals. And, so isn't that kind of why you can't shoot a deer, a female deer, a doe, in hunting season? Because, of course, there are some places where you wish you could shoot all of them. I have friends who live in Lake of the Pines, and they have so many deer in there, it's crazy.
On some islands in Hawaii, they don't have a hunting season. It's just year-round because they aren't native. So
Mhm.
overpopulation.
Yeah, so, and that's a different, entirely different discussion. But number of people, if you have disease, for example, floats along. See if I can spell disease today. That is going to affect, infant mortality was probably fairly high. So all of these things shaped, so how might it shape their art? Anybody want to think about that for a minute? Peyton, you had a really good idea.
Oh, depending on, like, well, I'd say ease of lifestyle, like depending on how available, like, food is and water, and like if you don't have disease or avenue in your community, you don't have a lot of natural disasters occurring, you'll probably be less struggling for survival. And when you aren't having to struggle for survival, you'll have more downtime. So like you can kind of tell, like when they're creating art, it's probably during a time when they're doing better versus when they're doing worse, where you'd probably have less art occurring, like less time for expression.
Okay, so that's one idea about artistic expression. Anybody can think of another variable that might be.
Maybe like rituals, like maybe they have the
Rituals.
belief that.
So they have, and good, because a lot of them were very spiritual people from what we can tell. Phones, if they become a distraction, I get to take them away. I'm just saying. So try and turn off the sound on your phones so that if you're getting a text, you can have it vibrate, but please don't be looking at texts in the middle of the lecture. That's, counterproductive for your success in the class. All right, so we've got some things like, the well-being of the tribe, as well as ritual. And ritual plays actually a huge part. It's almost like if they're not getting rain, if, the game, there's not enough game, they may be spending more time doing art. And we're going to kind of move on to that. So, Peyton, if you want to go ahead and, all right, so we've kind of covered all of this. So, but here's some other variables to think about. It started making tools. Obviously they had to shoot those animals with something. They need the containers to hold food, grains. A lot of people don't realize that wheat actually was indigenous to the area around Turkey, and it ended up developing to the point where some of us are gluten intolerant. Another story. Ritual, symbolic items, perhaps to influence natural forces in their favor, and for honoring the dead. That's huge because, death was a very big part of their lives. We have too much death in our lives as far as the violence we see on, gaming and the media and that sort of thing. However, there are cultures that are just totally absorbed by the afterlife. The life here is not that important. It's where you go next. Egypt was huge for that. All right, next slide. Okay, so this is the earliest history of rock painting and engraving arts in Africa. It's called the Apollo 11 stones. You can find it in Nambia, and look at where they think it was. And I got that wrong. It should be 25,300 and going down to 000. So I'll fix that. So you guys, if you spot an error, tell me.
Wait, what is this question?
When you're doing BCE, it's always counting from the larger number to the smaller number.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and we talked about that yesterday. So what's interesting about this is, has anybody heard of this artifact? Or so tell me why they called it Apollo 11 stone.
Because it was found like during the Apollo 11.
She read her barons, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yes. Congratulations. Good job. So that's true. So the individual who discovered this had a radio that was able to pick up the radio broadcast about Apollo 11 and decided to name it that. So it's kind of, a weird, oxymoron almost, because it's one of the earliest things to exist, and yet Apollo 11 is obviously a very modern event. However, it's a good way to remember it. So you can see it's two pieces of stone. Probably use what pigment do you think for black? What was the most readily available? Charcoal. Yeah, you'll see charcoal around a lot. Okay, next. Wow. All right, cave art. We talked a little bit about Lascaux, and they consider it to be Paleolithic. In France, exceptional quality, size, sophistication, antiquity. Estimated to be up to 20,000 years old. The paintings consist primarily of large animals once mated to the region. We're not going to look at the virtual tour right now because I'm recording for the students, but we will do that at the end of the video, or the end of me videoing this, because it's really cool, you know, because, you know, somebody has done a CG, so you can just, and they used to have one on the official Lascaux site where you could control where you went, but it looks like they've taken that down. But this is the official image that you need to know about. We've got our horned animal, and we've got that twisted perspective because he's in profile, except for the fact that the horns have been twisted. Okay, next slide. All right, so animals are drawn in profile. We already talked about twisted perspective. So I already talked about this. All right, next one. All right, so experts cannot give much context to these paintings. You know, we talked yesterday about them being painted possibly over 1,000 to 2,000 years, but yet it was pretty sophisticated because we had, you know, the oil lamps, we had the, you know, scaffolding, that sort of thing. But this is something that I thought was really fascinating. They can't really give a context for it, although one theory states that the artists believed that when they drew the animal, they captured the spirit, which allowed them to more easily find and kill the animals, or catch them, because I'm sure the horses were fairly early on used for transportation and that sort of thing. I doubt if they were just killed for food. And this is known as hunting magic. Really important phrase. You're going to want to know what hunting magic is. It's the belief that if they can draw the animal, you know, they'll capture the spirit and can more easily capture the animal. So that's something that's really important. All right. Okay. So we talked a little bit about the artifacts that might support the sophistication of the cave people. So we talked about that a little bit before. So let's jog your memories and see exactly what clues they found that helped them decide that this was pretty sophisticated work. Does anybody remember from yesterday? And I briefly mentioned it.
The little knot in the wall that indicated that they used
Yeah, so they
shells or
use scaffolding.
scaffolds.
All right, hate this. Scaffolding, you know, is something, because these caves, they're not, you know, a roof this high. They go a lot higher, you know, and so the first cave dwellings that were discovered in the 1800s in Spain, they actually accused the guy who discovered them of faking them, because they couldn't believe that you know, an ancient culture would actually be sophisticated enough to not only paint, you know, an animal, but get it up high. And so there was a huge controversy for many years. This individual that, you know, had first discovered the things. So what were some other things that they found? Yes.
Didn't we find like lots of like lamps or something?
Yeah. Exactly. So they had lamps for indication that there were some sort of oil lamps, and that kind of makes sense. How many of you have been in a cave and they've turned the lights off? I mean, that to me is so almost oppressive, because you know you're going to die in there if they don't turn those lights back on. So they had their lamps. There were also, you know, pigments, you know, were found. Okay. And then, do we have any indications that these images were not merely decorations? Go ahead, let's go to the next slide and see what we said. Okay, so evidence of oil lamps for light, pigments, stone tools, forgot to mention that one, and indication of scaffolding. Okay, what indicates that these images were not merely decorations? A lot of them were found deep in caves in really hard to reach places. So these people had, you know, they felt the need to go in and, you know, go through, you know, a lot of interesting places that, you know, it was not easy to get to. to go ahead and put the art in there. Okay, next slide. Okay, so these are a couple more items. We have already discussed this one, but this is a new one. This is an ambum stone, and it's from New Guinea. And notice it's getting, you know, a lot closer. It's a little more modern of a piece. So they used fired ceramics, paint. They etched designs into things, represented life forms, animals and humans, and 3D forms, large-scale monuments, and various environments. Art making was associated with tools, food production, settlement status, and the burial of the dead. So what's interesting about this is that this was probably used to pound sacred, you know, herbs or some other thing in, you know, a mortar and pestle-like arrangement. And this is made out of gray wax, and we'll see that, you know, more often. Okay, next one. We're still kind of doing the overview thing. Okay, so this is a really cool one because it's a running horned woman. You can see that she's kind of almost superimposed on other figures. This is found in a really hard to find place in Algeria. And they believe that there were annual events where different nomadic groups would come together and have various rituals and things. And so this horned woman was, you know, part of what they believed to be there, to the point where they found little caves underneath where, I mean, you have to scale a cliff to get into the cave to find this. And at the bottom of the cliff, you would find that they found little caves that looked like people would come and stay in those just temporarily, and then they would leave again. And there's all kinds of other rocks that have been etched on in the area as well. So we talked about spiritual or seasonal gatherings. Many objects and rock drawings were found. Often they were painted as well as incised. Anybody know what incised means? Okay, if you go to the doctor and he decides he's got to open this up, he gives you an incision. So something that's going to be incised is going to be, say, the rock surfaces like this, and then you're using a tool to actually etch into it. So, you know, they're essentially putting an incision in the rock. And, you know, they would have imagery that related to the use. So this is one of your images that you need to know for the test. All right, next one. Okay, this is, I want to go here. Has anybody been to Stonehenge?
No.
Okay, good for you. What did you think? Were there too many people so it wasn't quite the same?
Well, there were a lot of people, but it was also really fun to see it, like walk all the way around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there are various stages of it being built, and it's important when you read up that you understand that this was not just built in one fall swoop. The other thing that's very interesting is that it was set up so that you could get the winter and the summer solstice. It was also a place where they found human remains. It was a burial site. What's interesting is this rock is not local to the area. It had to be hauled at least 400 miles.
It's a lot of miles.
That's a lot of miles for very, very large stones. So pretty interesting. So we're still not sure exactly what all it was used for, but given that you're a hunter and a gatherer and you're reasonably intelligent, which I believe ancient man was, they're going to start noticing when the sun, you know, starts moving back up and becoming summer. And so they were very, very aware of what was happening in the sky and how that affected them. The winter solstice, you know, they would do rituals to try and get that sun to come back and spend more time, you know, each day, because it did affect their survival. So Stonehenge is really fascinating, and probably might be more questions, so make sure you study Stonehenge. Okay, next. All right, I love this. This is called Carhenge, and you can find it in Nebraska. And I believe they set it up for the summer solstice as well. So, you know, if you can't make it to England, personally, I think I'd rather go to England than Nebraska, but, you know, that could just be me. But interesting stuff. Okay. So now we move into the jade Kong, and this will come back to haunt you later on. They reference it more than just once in our curriculum, so it's good to know. So they use permanent things. This is made out of jade. Jade in China is a very sacred stone, so used a lot in relation, once again, to burials. And they also used hardened or fired clay, and we saw that with the terracotta soldiers, which we'll be studying later on. But what's really interesting is they also have very stylized eyes on the sides. And, you know, for a lot of people who thought they invented abstract art, if they go and look at ancient art, they'll discover that mankind has been stylizing things a lot sooner than anybody thought. Okay, next one. Okay, we looked at this one just a little bit. The anthropomorphic stela. If you don't know what anthropomorphic means, you need to look it up. Paleolithic humans established settlements in west, south, southwest, east, and southeast Asia between 70,000 and 40,000. So what's interesting is that, you know, these settlements. So basically what happened is that after a while, especially I already mentioned that wheat was first found in the area of Turkey, and it started, you know, people started actually growing it, so they became more agricultural based. So they probably still hunted, but they also would create settlements. And what's interesting, a lot of people don't realize it, is that there were also trade routes that started being developed. And so if you look at the sample of my flashcard for this, I have noted that. I posted it on Classroom, so you can take a look at it close up. Establishing trade routes, and so where the crossroads of trade routes would come together, you would find things like this. Because a lot of people think that a lot of these nomadic groups were pretty isolated, but when they started actually settling, it was because they were getting, you know, nomadic groups from other places who had interesting things that they might want to trade for, you know. And so this is very stylized, once again, very interesting that it's not just a very realistic depiction of a man, but a man at that time would probably have some sort of dagger or sword on him. And he might have, you know, he might be dressed in, you know, a long gown, as it were, in the Middle East. The nice thing about the Middle East is that if you're male, you can wear a skirt. Scotland is the same that way. When it's hot in the summer, I like to wear dresses, and when you're in a hot climate, you really don't want to be wearing pants or slacks and that kind of thing. So, you know, obviously there is some, you know, etching on the back, but by and large, it is, you know, most of the detail is on that side. Okay, next. Okay, this is another really important to keep in mind. So this is from the Solomon Islands. Solomon Islands are in the Pacific, and it's what's called the terracotta fragment. So, you know, humans from Asia are believed to have migrated to the Pacific region, possibly due to lower ocean levels and the existence of what they call land bridges. So when people came from Asia into the Pacific region, they brought the idea of using ceramics or clay. And they created pottery that with etched geometric designs still in use today. What's really interesting is they believe this is one of the first depictions of the human face, even though it's stylized on this particular piece of artwork. So that's one of the reasons why it was chosen by the College Board. It's because not only is it an early example of ceramics in Oceania, which is what we call any of those areas that are very much dominated by the ocean, so it's ceramic, and it came from Asia originally, but also because of the depiction of the face. So something, you know, to think about. And to me, that's really interesting, because you start thinking about, you know, when did they decide to start doing faces? They didn't have mirrors, you know, so maybe they stylized them to represent the chief, or who knows. And when we get into Pacific Oceania, we'll look at the idea of tattoos and how important that was to that culture. They had a chief from one of the Pacific Islands that came to Europe, and they asked him through an interpreter to draw a portrait of himself. He drew exact replica of his tattoo, but he didn't draw his face. And to me, that's very interesting. They saw themselves more because of their tattoos than because of what their actual natural face looked like. Okay, next. Okay, so then we move into the Americas. This is a camelid sacrum. It's in the shape of a dog or canine. So camelid means something that's camel-like. So it might have been, you know, a llama or one of those other, you know, early ancestors to a llama. And they made sculptures. Humans migrated from Asia. And they believed that, you know, along the, you know, Americas, that they followed those land bridges or sailed somehow, starting to populate the Americas. So they brought, you know, clay, but they also would take animal bones and carve on them. And the sacrum is a large triangular bone at the base of the spine of any mammal. The artist took advantage of the natural shape and created the head of a canine. So this is found in Taquixtla, I don't think I pronounced that right, in central Mexico. And notice once again, starting to get a little bit closer to contemporary, but still with work on the era. Okay, next. Okay, this is fairly benign for a fertility sculpture. They did away with one, it's a Venus, that is just got massive hips, massive breasts, and you can't even see the face. And for a lot of people, they say, well, how can they do that to a woman? But for a lot of people, well, we talked about it. You want your tribe or your group, your nomadic group, to have children, have babies. And they knew, obviously, that women had the babies. So women were often depicted in even small little, you know, images that they would carry around, feeling like there was power in that that would make their women or a specific woman more fertile. So it's you know, it's in a sexual context, but different from, say, a pornographic or, you know, suggestive. For them, fertility was very important. You know, if you've got a death rate of, you know, 50% or more, you know, not every baby that's born is going to live. So, so you notice that the large breasts and hips are often greatly enlarged while other parts are diminished. Suggests the importance of the shamanic religion brought from Asia by early migrants. So we'll get more into shamanism when we go into Africa and the United States. Okay. All right, so technology that's used. So we've gotten a lot of technology besides just digging stuff up. You know, carbon, you know, dating shows interconnections of art across the planet, but without a written language, much of what we know is based on guessing. Understanding prehistoric artistic expression and its function involves making inferences based on their tools, what the function of them might be. What are they, task related or expressive? You know, a mask is probably considered to be expressive, whereas, you know, the emblem stone that we saw was probably more task related. In the rise of a sophisticated culture and man's ability to shape. Yes, another typo. Okay, so we're done with this one. So let's move on to another one. Let me fix that really quick and hit and do this today. So we did this eight, and then we're looking for. So this is kind of fun. All right, so once again, we're talking a little bit more about what art is. I should put a question mark on there. Good thing it's not an English class, huh? Okay, first slide. Let's get someone to read this. Neil, if you want to go ahead and read that, please.
The expression or application of human creative skill and imagination, typically individual forms such as painting or sculpture, producing works to be appreciated primarily for their beauty or emotional power.
Okay, so that's one definition of art. However, the art we're going to be looking at is not necessarily producing works that are appreciated primarily for their beauty or emotional power. Okay, so first slide. All right, how many of you know who Stephen Colbert is? Yeah. Okay, so this is kind of a joke, and you'll probably have to go online to read more about it, that he went ahead and had a real-life, honest-to-goodness portrait artist paint his portrait. And then he donated it to the Smithsonian. And, you know, it was kind of a big joke that the Smithsonian would never display it. However, they ended up displaying it in an area of the Smithsonian where the women's restroom is here, the men's restroom is here, and his prestigious painting is over the drinking fountain. You also notice that in order to be very, you know, arrogant or whatever, he's actually supposedly in front of a mirror, and he's got himself going back, although in theory, what would you notice about this if it was truly a mirror? What would you notice? Yeah, you would see the back of his head. And you can notice that the poses change as well. So would you consider this art? Is it significant? Can you enjoy this art? Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is King Menkar and his queen. This is done out of gray wick. And it was done, you know, in the, 2000 BCE era. This was not done just so people would know what he looked like. We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, next one. Okay, this is called Spiral Jetty. It was done in 1970. If I'm not mistaken, it's still around today, although it's really hard to get to, so you got to really want to go. And so it's considered to be an earthwork. It's made with mud, precipitated salt crystals, rocks, and water coil. So this was in the oh come on, what is that big salt sea in Utah? I'm blanking. Yeah, Salt Lake. Duh. Some days I'm just on top of it. Yes, Claire.
Do you go to that place? Like, is that a real place?
Yes, you could go there.
Where?
It's outside of Salt Lake City, but it's on Salt Lake in Utah. And what's interesting is it changes, and that was one of the things the artist wanted, is that he wanted it to change. So depending on the level of the lake, the time of the year, obviously if you're in a wet season, you're not going to have as much salt, drying out, crystallizing on the rocks that are above water than you would say in the summertime when you're not getting as much rain. And so some people consider this art. Yeah.
Is it not eroded away?
I think there's probably some erosion, but Salt Lake is, not a lake that, has a lot of water coming into it and rushing through. And I don't believe people do a lot of water skiing or who knows what. So I don't think there's a lot of turbulence other than what nature would cause. I really should find a picture of this where it's actually showing a human being so we could see the scale. Because obviously the spiral is going to be bigger than this. Okay, next one. Okay, and then we got the terracotta warriors from the mausoleum. These were also not made for people to enjoy. They were very symbolic. They were to help this, the first Qin Empire to, have people to guard him in the afterlife. So there's a lot of different reasons why art is made. Okay, next. All right, this is called Fountain, Marcel Duchamp, 1950. Few years before I was born. Yeah, it's a urinal. It's upside down, but it is. And notice they say ready-made glazed sanitary china. I think that's the height and a euphemism to call it that instead of just say it's a urinal. Come on, really. So what's interesting is he supposedly entered this as a joke. Marcel Duchamp, and people took it really seriously and they were just shocked and in awe. But do you consider it art? Okay, we have another slide. Is that it?
I think.
Okay, good. All right, good. Okay, so we're going to do a classroom activity, and the internet students will be told what they're supposed to do, and then we're probably going to do our first blog talking about this. So the way to blog, have any of you blogged using Classroom before? If I am not mistaken, because it's the first year I'm trying this, underneath everything that I post, you can respond. I recommend that you go ahead and type one paragraph discussing your own opinions about these images, and it will be posted so you can reference that. And are they really art? Okay. So let's go ahead and stop the video camera. Thank you, Peyton, for doing this.